Broadcasting from Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II. Today on the show, in Warren, a new effort is trying to close the cracks in the justice system that leave survivors of domestic violence waiting for help.
Plus, Michigan's Senate race has automakers watching closely. Where do the candidates stand on protecting jobs and steering the state's biggest industry through another transition?
And across Detroit's urban farms, the soil is rich with possibility. But a new administration could change what grows next.
Also, the invisible forces that move us: migration, memory, belonging, and how a good story can make the world feel a little wider.
Today's stories tell us communities are held together by the systems we build and the tales we tell. This is the Metro.
Our first story takes us to Warren, where police handle thousands of domestic violence calls annually. That cycle of domestic violence is pushing law enforcement to act differently, to move faster, and meet survivors where they are. In May, police launched Operation Cycle Break. It's a new program designed to close the gaps in how domestic violence cases move through the system. The goal is fewer repeat calls and fewer incidents overall. The effort brings together the Warren Police Department, prosecutors, a nonprofit that supports survivors, and researchers at Wayne State University. Sergeant James Twardesky and Captain Brent Chisolm are with the Warren Police. They're the architects of Operation Cycle Break, and they join me now. Sergeant Twardesky and Captain Chisolm, welcome to the Metro.
Thanks for having us.
Hello.
Captain Chisolm, I'm going to start with you. Let's set the stage here. What's the state of domestic violence cases in Warren? Are you seeing any trends over the last few years?
Yeah, so domestic violence has been a key driver of violent crime in Warren. And this whole project began with a deep dive into all of our information that we collect daily into what was driving a significant amount of the major cases that we had in Warren. And when we actually analyzed those cases, a clear majority of them had a domestic violence nexus. And so Sergeant Twardesky and I, who both attended Wayne State University, agreed that we wanted to bring Wayne State on board to be a great partner to evaluate our response. And so we've implemented several key changes to how our department responds in collaboration with the courts, the prosecutor's office, Turning Point, that nonprofit that you mentioned, to formulate a holistic response to domestic violence rather than just responding to a call, handling the call, and moving on to the next one.
Captain Chisolm, before we get into more of this holistic strategy, can we go back to something you said about domestic violence cases being a key driver of violent crime? And you used the word, it's at the nexus of crimes. Can you explain that a little more for us?
I think, one, like the captain mentioned, we did a deep dive, right? So we started reading the police reports behind the violent crimes. And often you were seeing that the offender and the victim had some sort of relationship, child in common. They dated currently, they dated in the past. And so we often would see that. The other thing I think you'll find, if you think about it, the people that are committing violent crimes in general, whether it's gang, drugs, or some other motivation, it's oftentimes these guys are abusive and violent in their personal lives as well. So it's not as if someone that is going to do a violent crime in the community then goes back and, has a nice glass of Chardonnay with the wife and talks it over and, everything's peaceful. So we felt strongly by focusing on violence in the home, that we would possibly have an effect on violence in the community as a whole.
So you're getting at some of the lesser known ideas about domestic violence. Back to you, Sergeant Twardesky. Can you talk about a few of the others, of the things that we don't think about when we're talking about domestic violence?
Well, I think, and to understand domestic violence, you have to understand that it's a very broad term. And so when you say domestic violence, that could mean a homicide, which is obviously a very severe end. And then it could also mean, my spouse got laid off of work, had too much to drink, and they slapped me a couple times. And that's not, neither of those situations are good, but you obviously in the one, on the more severe end, you need a stronger intervention, and prison time or something more severe might be the appropriate response. But At the lower end, maybe this is a family unit that doesn't have to live in this sort, that doesn't have to have this become a cycle, and it just needs some help in the moment. And then obviously you have domestic violence situations that will fall in between those two extremes. And we're just trying to address all of those.
And when you say a cycle, the cycle of domestic violence, how prevalent, how common is there a cycle, and what does that look like? Paint a picture for us, if you would.
Well, I think it's hard to say how common it is, because I think we probably experience more of the lower end ones where someone's under a lot of stress or has a substance abuse or mental health problem and then acts out violently towards family. But I think there is a huge component of it creates kind of a cycle where a partner is abusive to the other partner, and it slowly builds up over time, and they're, reach a point where maybe they're controlling their money, they're controlling who they see, they're controlling their life, and then they're also using physical violence to control those people. And our data, and I think the captain would agree with me, just our experience in law enforcement, there's a lot of repeat offenders, right? We're seeing these situations where the police are coming out to a house multiple times, and we know it's underreported. So if we're coming out multiple times, there's probably several other instances that occurred that the police weren't called. So that's what we're trying to address when we talk about the cycle.
And back to you, Captain Chisolm. So the idea of addressing this from a more holistic place, that doesn't sound like that's the common strategy among law enforcement. Would you say that this is a project that is somewhat unique in that way? That, I mean, we know that, for example, social workers, I've spoken to social workers at Wayne State University who are trying to bring together law enforcement and healthcare workers to try and address issues like this. But for the police to initiate something where they're saying, hey, we need to close the gaps by working together with all of these other different entities, how unique is that, or not?
Yeah, it's a very unique approach to a law enforcement or a community-wide problem even. Typically, the law enforcement response is respond to an incident, make an arrest if there's probable cause, submit a warrant to the prosecutor's office, and on to the next one. So really putting more resources and getting partners to help ensure, like the Sergeant Twardesky said, that the same families that are reaching out or the same problems don't repeat themselves is a key difference here. And so realizing that the first domestic violence call to the police is not the first incident that probably happened, and what happened on that day doesn't tell the whole picture, helps inform our response by allowing and really advocating for the victims and even the offenders to try to get them the resources to not engage in this behavior, to break the cycle, right? So we not only provide the victims of a crime with a partnership with Turning Point and with resources, we also provide the offenders with resources if they want to change their behavior. And so while they're in our jail, we give them a notification letter putting them on notice that this is not going to be tolerated. We give them a resource list, and we also on the victim end, we do follow up with a non-enforcement contact with the victims in person to their house to talk with them about what their experience was at the initial call, and if they need anything else from us as far as coordinating with the additional resources.
Okay, so you're painting a little bit of a picture here for us about how this program works in practice. Are there other elements to this that you think are important to point out that are different from the status quo, how things used to be done or typically are done?
So a couple of things. One, we're just putting a focus on it. Okay. We're focusing both on the offenders and on the victim follow-up. So like the captain mentioned, when you're arrested for domestic violence in the city of Warren, one of our detectives goes and meets with you personally. And we like to think of it as a carrot and a stick approach. We put the carrot out there, which is if you don't like being in jail, if you don't like dealing with the police, here are some counseling resources in the community that specialize in abusive relationships that could help you. And you could go see them and you could improve your life and stop having contact with the Warren Police Department. We also give them a letter saying that we're not putting up with this anymore. So if you don't want to go to counseling, you want to continue the behavior, know that you're on a list and we're going to follow up and we're going to enforce the law to the full extent. And so one of the things we try to do is if the offender is in here for domestic violence, is also engaging in other criminal activity, possessing illegal guns, selling narcotics, doing anything that they don't want the police looking into now, we're making a concerted effort to follow up on them to let them know that it's not going to be tolerated here in Warren, and that they should consider changing their behavior. The other thing we're targeting is the victim follow-up. So as you can imagine, if there's a domestic violence incident and the police have come out and you've been assaulted by your loved one, that's a pretty traumatic event. Your life's been a little turned upside down. It's not what you had planned for that Saturday night, let's say. And so we know that they're going to be in a state of crisis. And so we found that the information we're getting that night is not complete. And so we started a process of following up 3 to 10 days after, because we find, one, we get more of the story because they're no longer in a traumatic state. Two, after it's been a few days, we get a better picture from the victim of what life is going to look like going forward. So some of them may have moved out, or they may have changed phone numbers, or insert whatever they've decided to do in those few days. And then we're now getting a clearer picture of the full story, because we're talking to them. We're not in a state of crisis. And it's also a good chance for us just to follow up and make sure they're safe and seeing if they've had any more contact from the offender.
And when you talk about a clearer picture, that makes me want to get a little bit of a clearer picture, too, on some of the roles of the partnerships in your program, because something that we are hearing and we have been hearing is this notion that police are simply doing too much, that we need to find ways for police to be able to rely more on social workers, let's say. So where do the jobs of police end and community or social workers or family begin? What are the limits of law enforcement with domestic violence?
I don't think there's limits on either side. It's more of using the right tool for the job. So we try and get the victims as much as we can referred to Turning Point. Turning Point provides counseling. They provide long-term assistance with whatever might help the victim get out of that situation. They do things that we at the police department are not good at and don't have the resources or capabilities to do. On the other hand, it's very hard to get assistance or go to counseling if you're constantly worried for your safety in the house and the offender is constantly coming by harassing you, threatening you, or assaulting you. The police department is very good at dealing with people who break the law and don't cooperate. So I think it's each tool doing the right job. So the police department, we're specialized, and we can find someone, we can arrest them, we can bring them into jail and keep them out of your home. And versus Turning Point, which is going to be able to provide more, like, I guess, what you would traditionally call social work towards the victim.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. My guests are Sergeant Twardesky and Captain Chisolm of the Warren Police Department. We're discussing how they're trying to reduce domestic violence in the city. You know, this has me wondering, as we're talking about some of the strides and the more imaginative and innovative ways that you're looking to deal with this problem, it has me wondering about the training itself that law enforcement is receiving in Warren. Is it evolving at all? Has it changed when it comes to addressing domestic violence?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we rolled this program out, we did have Turning Point come in and talk about the drivers of trauma with victims and why they may present differently than other victims of crime. And so, informing our officers about the actual facts and to talk to them about some of the changes from what they might see on a scene to what happens 2-3 days later in the follow-up investigation, to try to give them a broader understanding of not only a particular domestic violence case, but how this affects the city, violent crime, and the police department and community in general.
So again, what I'm hearing is it's really a lot more of a holistic approach. It's not only with this program working across the lines, working with social workers and nonprofit folks and prosecutors, but it's also the mindset of law enforcement who are going into these cases.
Yeah, if you care about violent crime and people being victimized and things like that in Warren, then you should care about domestic violence. That is the fundamental driver, right? And so again, telling our officers, okay, yeah, you obviously you don't want violent crime to happen on your beat, on your watch, and you don't want to have to deal with somebody that's been the victim of a violent crime or make family notifications on a violent crime. So if you care about those things, and that's why a lot of people became police officers, is because they were worried about those things. Well, then let's care about domestic violence, because that's the solution.
Yeah, I'm wondering as well about the ways that research has helped to inform this project too, because you both attended Wayne State and you're working with Wayne State's criminology department. So talk about how that's helping to inform this work as well.
Well, we felt strongly that we wanted to use an evidence-based process, and we also felt strongly that we wanted to know that what we were doing was having a positive effect. And so it would be very easy for us to analyze ourselves and then pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, great job, you did wonderful. We felt by bringing in Wayne State that they have again, using the right tool for the job. Research and analytics is definitely their strong suit as a university. And so we felt strongly that them evaluating the program and looking for what they found would give us a better indicator of what was working, what was not working, and would also give us an insight, because they obviously are very up to date on the latest criminology and academic research. And so they could add that big picture stuff to our day-to-day operations to help us do better.
And of course, it's not only just letting research inform this work, but it's also talking with survivors. I'm wondering if survivors have had any role in helping to shape this work too.
I would say yes. So some of this, we didn't just think of this in the last, few months. This is something that I think Captain Chisolm and I have noticed over a career of doing this. And so I found that certain detectives were having more success at getting their victims either to court or to a safe place than other detectives. And what we started to see was that those detectives were more often following up with the victims to let them know that they cared about them. And they were more often doing a better job of getting the victims to places like Turning Point. And so the goal of this program was to make what I had seen work over a lot of time into a more systematic fashion, so that the PD was doing it and not just hit or miss depending on which detective got the case.
And now, of course, the question is, how do we measure the success of this program? What does that look like?
So I think part of that is to look at recidivism, right? So that's a fairly straightforward way to look at if an offender is arrested for one crime, did they commit the similar crime later on after this treatment. So that's an easy cross comparison that can be had from years past. Look at 23, 22, 21, same time period. What percentage of offenders, reoffended, engaged in domestic violence, and over what time horizon? Our goal is to prevent anybody that's in the program from reoffending. And if they do reoffend, that it's not an escalation of violence, that it's a less violent, because what we see with domestic violence, oftentimes it is an escalation of violence. So our two major things that we would consider to be successful would be recidivism is decreased, and the lethality of future and domestic violence is decreased. Because ultimately, we can put a lot of people in counseling. We can talk to them. We can follow up with victims. The less violent the offense, the better it is for the victim and for the response.
So this explains the very aptly named Operation Cycle Break. Captain Brent Chisolm and Sergeant James Twardesky of the Warren Police Department, they're the architects of Operation Cycle Break. Thanks so much for joining me on the Metro.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's the Metro on WDET. Coming up, candidates running to be Michigan's next senator will bring the state's economic interests to Washington, D.C. Their policies will have to include consideration on a key part of the state's economy, and that is the auto industry. We'll discuss where they stand on tariffs, electric vehicles, and more. That's next on the Metro. Stay with us.